Hello ladies and gentlemen, it's Young here and welcome to a Metal Gear Solid 5 theory analysis. By popular demand, today I would like to discuss the theory that Quiet from the Phantom Pain is a transsexual Chico. Believe it or not, this theory has gained a lot of traction over the past few weeks and has been circulating the web for a while now. As ridiculous as the theory may sound, I urge you to watch the entire video before scoffing it off. You'd be surprised at how compelling the argument and the supporting evidence is. Let me begin by discussing the simplest point of argument for this theory: physical resemblance. If the two characters are compared side by side, it is certainly possible to see various similarities in facial features, and it's impossible to miss how the two share the same hair and eye colors. Hell, even the concept arts seem to indicate facial similarities between the two characters. Furthermore, Quiet seems to be around the same age that Chico would be during the Phantom Pain, so around 21 or 22 years old. But of course, physical resemblance and age consistency are not even close to being enough evidence to argue something as seemingly ridiculous as the possibility that Chico transformed into a female in the 9-year gap between Ground Zeroes and the Phantom Pain. The meat of the theory lies within Chico's backstory. As many of you may know, during the events of Ground Zeroes, Chico underwent, for lack of better words, hell on earth. During his captivity in Camp Omega, Chico was subjected to the horrible act of being forced to rape Paz Ortega, who he cared and developed feelings for. So what does any of this have to do with Chico becoming a woman? According to the theory, Chico was so traumatized by these events that he eventually resorted to castrating himself and becoming a woman to ensure that he would never be able to hurt someone sexually ever again. After what he was forced to do as a man by Skullface, the assumption is that Chico no longer felt the will to live as a man, which is why, according to the theory, between Ground Zeroes and the Phantom Pain, Chico decided to transform into a woman and live as one. Castration may seem extreme, but keep in mind that Metal Gear Solid 5's subtitle is The Phantom Pain, which is lingering pain after the loss of a limb or body part, and we've already seen multiple limbs missing from various characters, namely Big Boss's right eye and left arm, and Kaz's right arm and left leg. Furthermore, it's well-known knowledge that Kojima aims to tackle various taboos with Metal Gear Solid 5, so who's to say that castration won't be a part of that? It's also important to keep in mind that for Metal Gear Solid 5, the Phantom Pain doesn't only refer to lingering physical pain, but also lingering emotional and psychological pain, and how that pain drastically changes people, which falls in line with what Kojima said about Ground Zeroes being the ground zero for many of the franchise's characters, and how the events of the prologue lead to dramatic physical, emotional, and psychological changes. We already know that characters like Big Boss and Kaz become much darker characters, so who's to say that more radical transformations, like a man wanting to live as a woman, isn't possible? Now, the trauma of being forced to rape Paz may serve as argument for why Chico would consider becoming a woman, but none of that explains why Chico ends up mute. According to the E3 trailer, Quiet is a character who is deprived of her words. Whether it's because of physical or psychological reasons is unknown, but it wouldn't be far-fetched to assume that Quiet lost her tongue, which once again falls in line with themes like lost limbs and phantom pain. Regardless, the fact remains that Quiet is mute. To explain why Chico became mute, the theory once again relies on Chico's captivity in Camp Omega. As many of you know, sometime during his captivity, in hopes to end Paz's suffering, Chico provided Skullface with key intel regarding MSF, Mother Base, and Metal Gear Zeke, which would allow Skullface to infiltrate and obliterate Mother Base. In other words, Chico's spoken words were a key contributor to the death of his comrades and the downfall of MSF. This wasn't the first time Chico betrayed his comrades through words either. If you recall, during the events of Peace Walker, Chico was captured by Peace Sentinels and tortured for information about his compas. When Snake came for his rescue, he was so ashamed of giving up the information that he wished he was dead. As if betraying his comrades once wasn't hard enough on him, he would be forced to do it again a few months later, and the consequences would be exponentially greater the second time. So according to the theory, the trauma of knowing that his words led to the loss of so many comrades is what leads Chico to cut off his tongue, all to ensure that his words would never harm or betray others ever again. A pretty compelling argument thus far, don't you think? But it gets better. Further supporting this theory is intel from a Ground Zero side op called Eliminate the Renegade Threat. The objective of this mission is to eliminate US Marine Corps Sniper Spotter Team, Glass and Pallets, the eye and the finger respectively. What some of you may not know is that players can complete the mission by extracting these two targets, which results in the revelation of some very interesting information that corroborates this theory. Take a listen.
We searched the two targets you recovered. One of them had a glass eye, the other a prosthetic index finger. Looks like all the therapy and drugs couldn't help them forget the war. They resorted to self-mutilation. But you can't cut off your name. Just like us, they were human.
Kaz's debriefing reveals that the two soldiers self-mutilated the parts of their bodies that brought harm to others, all in an attempt to forget the trauma that they suffered through war. Isn't it possible that Chico, whose male sex organ and tongue brought harm to his comrades and the people he cared for, self-mutilated these body parts to forget his trauma and to ensure that these body parts would not be misused again? I, like many of you, was ready to dismiss this theory completely when I first heard of it, but then I realized that Ground Zeroes hints at the possibility of self-mutilation. It completely threw me off. After considering Kaz's debriefing about the eye and the finger, I am ready to believe that there could be some possibility to the theory that Chico self-mutilated his sex organ and his tongue to deal with his trauma. Now, I'm not saying that this theory is definitely true or anything like that, but I'm willing to keep a more open mind about it. So let's assume for a second that Quiet is indeed Chico. All of a sudden, the scenes in the Phantom Pain's Red Band trailer showing the torture of Huey and Quiet make sense. Those who played through Ground Zeroes and listened to all the cassette tapes probably know that Huey and Chico were the biggest sources from within MSF to contribute to the destruction of Mother Base. Huey was instrumental to allowing the fake nuclear inspection to go through and making Big Boss and Kaz believe that the inspection was the real deal, while Chico and the intel he provided were instrumental to the success of Skullface's Trojan Horse operation. It doesn't matter whether they were under duress or not. The fact remains that their actions and words destroyed everything that Big Boss and Kaz built, and are therefore deemed traitors. We already know with near certainty that Huey is being tortured for treason in the Red Band trailer, which means that it's possible that Quiet, who is under very similar circumstances to Huey, is also being tortured for the same reason. And if she is being tortured for treason, then she has to be a familiar character from MSF who was instrumental to Skullface's infiltration of Mother Base. And as far as we know, the only two characters that fit the profile are Huey and Chico, and Huey is already accounted for. Therefore, the assumption is that Quiet can only be Chico. The theory also points out other minor connections between Chico and Quiet. For example, if we take a look at Chico's bio in Peace Walker, the last sentence states that Chico wants to become a hunter, and no weapon is better for such a profession than a sniper rifle. In fact, if we take a look at this concept art of Chico, he can clearly be seen wielding a small sniper rifle. All of this falls in line with the fact that Quiet herself is a sniper. Something else that's interesting to note is that Chico's father looks a hell lot like the End from the Cobra unit, with the assumption being that Chico could be the End's grandson, thereby explaining why Quiet has the fading mascara that resembles the End's fading liver spots, also explaining why Quiet is proficient with a sniper rifle similar to the End. Then there's the matter of Quiet's breasts, which are assumed to be implants due to their unusual size and perfect shape, thus helping explain how Chico came to develop breasts. For those thinking that breast implants are highly unlikely, keep in mind that they are nothing new to the franchise. Checking Eva's medical profile in Metal Gear Solid 3 reveals that her breasts are implants, so who's to say that Quiet's breasts aren't implants as well? Finally, Stephanie Houston, the actress for Quiet, tweeted various pictures of herself wearing a number of familiar costumes throughout the months of Metal Gear Solid 5's development. For example, the costume she is wearing in these two pictures from one of their motion capture sessions seems to resemble the End's outfit, while the costume in this other picture seems to heavily resemble Chico's outfit, as noted by the scarf and the arm strap. The assumption is that these costumes could be hints in regards to Stephanie's character's true identity. In my opinion, the costume stuff is grasping at straws, but I do believe that some of the other connections do have their merits. Now, all the connections between Chico and Quiet that have been made thus far were made through information extracted from Metal Gear Solid games, but there's one final bit of evidence that ties everything together, and it comes directly from Hideo Kojima. Many of you may recall when Kojima tweeted that he wanted to make Quiet more erotic, which was met with some backlash from the media. Kojima responded to the backlash through a number of tweets, hinting in the process that Quiet isn't all that she seems. The tweets read as follows: "I know there's people out there concerning about Quiet, but don't worry. I created her character as an antithesis to the women characters appeared in the past fighting game who are excessively exposed. Quiet, who doesn't have a word, will be teased in the story as well, but once you recognize the secret reason for her exposure, you will feel ashamed of your words and deeds." Unfortunately, some of what Kojima is trying to convey gets lost in the translation, but it is very clear that Kojima labels Quiet as an antithesis to women characters, and as someone who will make people feel ashamed of thinking of Quiet as nothing more than a sexualized female character. So according to the theory, Kojima's reply to the backlash fits very well with the possibility that Quiet and Chico are one and the same character, and that Quiet is a result of the trauma that Chico suffered during the events of Ground Zeroes. I will admit there are some compelling aspects to this theory that have opened my mind to entertaining its plausibility, but by no means do I believe the theory is airtight, and I am still leaning a lot more towards the assumption that this theory is false. After all, most of this evidence is circumstantial at best. Then again, so little is known about Quiet that it's difficult to argue against the theory. What do you make of all this? Do you think it's possible that there's some truth to this theory? Do you have anything to add to or argue against the presented evidence? Be sure to let our nation know in the comments below, and to be further updated on Metal Gear Solid 5, be sure to join the nation and subscribe to Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you very much, and Young out!